Good afternoon, viewers. The first interview which the Dateline Gujarat did was to demystify the process of demonetization when it was announced by the Prime Minister of India on the 8th November 2016. There was a lot of voice on the social media, and to demystify the process of demonetization, beyond the voices on the social media, we had talked to Dr. JayNarayan Vyas. The interview was done a little bit in a darker phase because at that time there was no clarity as to why this move has been all of a sudden, why the notes of 500 rupees and 1000 rupees have been demonetized. But clearly, that was the beginning. At that time, if you see Bahubali beginning and Bahubali conclusion, this was the kind of sequel which was making a noise around even in the Bollywood and Indian cinema. So that was the beginning. What we say, the interview, the first interview which we did with Dr. JayNarayan Vyas on demonetization was the beginning where he had clearly outlined three things. One was that the Indian parallel economy, or you call the black money economy, was not at par with the global benchmark or the kind of component the parallel economy component has in the Western world or the Western countries. It was much beyond that. Secondly, what he had said was that be ready to face the hardships. This interview is already there, which we had done on our YouTube handle, on our Facebook, and he had clearly said that be ready to face the hardships. And a third and a very important observation which he had made, where we asked him a question and he said that government has a mammoth task ahead, and government has definitely taken a lot of things into consideration before announcing this move of demonetization, and there can't be a kind of a hasty move when you are talking of demonetizing or putting down or demarking the currency, which was almost in tune of 18.5 lakh crores in circulation in denomination of 500 and 1000 rupees. Once again, to conclude this whole episode, there's been a lot of noise in last few weeks again on the demonetization, that the PAL committee and the Public Accounts Committee has tabled a report into the parliament, but the MPs from the Bharatiya Janata Party are stalling the process. That was the story broken by Times Now exclusively, and then it has been followed by several media houses. Once again, to demystify the whole process, whether the demonetization was successful or not, the process was okay or not. Once again, we talked to Dr. JayNarayan Vyas, and what we ask him is, Dr. JayNarayan Vyas has been somebody who is an economist, a thinker, who has been a tourism and a health minister in the Modi regime in Gujarat, one of the architects of the successful Kuch Din To Guzariye Gujarat Mein campaign involving Amitabh Bachchan. So we talked to Dr. JayNarayan Vyas, who will demystify the whole process and tell us whether demonetization has been successful or not. So we asked Dr. JayNarayan Vyas, welcome to Dateline Gujarat. You're live on the Facebook page of Dateline Gujarat. And so, first question, what I would like to ask you is that, how do you see this now from here?
See, now the picture has unfolded. And despite that, there are number of views for and against being expressed. That itself shows how complicated and complex the issue was. And I'm sure for many years to come, this issue is not going to die down. It's going to be one of the issues, as far as Indian economy is concerned, in debate off and on. Now, let me say why I say that. You are talking about one of the basic motives behind this demonetization. That was curbing the black money. The second was the control on the terrorist activities and the issues like that. I think the task is so mammoth. And to say that black money is only in forms of note itself is something which is absolutely wrong. If you look at the investment avenues in which black money is hoarded, the first comes residential buildings and real estate, followed by the land plot, the third precious metal, the fourth diamond and gems, the fifth Benami investment, the sixth stock market and the investments in the stocks, and now much talked about the coca companies and the kind of penny stocks and Ponzi companies. The sixth is stock in trade. If you are in a business, your stock in trade is any day adjustable, and that's how it is cleverly done when the balance sheets are prepared to show or not to show the profit. The seventh is the assets that you hold. The eighth is foreign holdings. It was once upon a time, you understand, one major issue which was being talked about, the black money stacked abroad. So that is ninth is the
Cash.
cash. So you are attacking a minuscule segment of the black money. The giants are somewhere else, and here you are talking about something which is attacking the cash for search of the black money. Obviously, therefore, the motive is good, the intentions are noble. When you talk about curbing the black money, I think if you look in the terms of jurisprudence, the intention, the motives is absolutely in place. It is fine. It is correct. But then the issue is, India is one of the countries where the cash in circulation is the highest. India is amongst the highest levels of currencies in circulation. That is about 12.1% of GDP. And this has, let us now, when we talk about from 12.1%, it has brought down to 1.8% less cash in circulation of the GDP for various reasons. I don't say it is only because of demonetization, but the fact is that the cash in circulation as percentage of GDP has been reduced to 1.8%, by 1.8%. To that extent, it becomes accountable. 1.8% of GDP is not a small amount as such. But when you look at it in a perspective that almost every year in this country 30 to 35 lakh crores get added, and 50% of the country's GDP is what you are talking about, the size of black money economy, then it is not that substantial. It has eventually taken up crossing 1 billion transactions of electronic cash. And that is for two reasons, according to me. Number one, for a while, as we predicted last interview, for a while there was shortage of cash. The ATMs were running dry. The banks did not have sufficient cash to deliver, and therefore this was a force move which made people to go to Paytm or other kinds of electronic platforms. And this might have, and according to me, this has considerably driven the possible users, especially the urban elite, to resort to the electronic platform,
Digital transactions.
digital transactions. So these are the pros and cons. What broadly, if we look at what is happening, this is what has happened.
I clearly recall, when you said that the cash is not the component. It's not like the cash is hidden beyond the pillows the way it was talked about, that we'll recover the black money or the black economy would be beyond the hidden pillows. The time we did an interview with you, it was in a dark zone. Do you see a broad daylight now from here for Indian economy? Do you see a broad daylight ahead when you say that the demonetization? We have yet not debated whether it is successful or it is not successful. But do you see a kind of broad daylight from here? What we see and what we learn from your narration and your narrative is that the cash component for a while moved towards digital transactions. Again, it is in circulation. Again, it has increased. And if you see the cash in circulation as compared to other economies, the proportionate to the GDP is high in India as compared to other economies.
You're right.
So do you see this? This would somewhere, because I understand that the rural economies yet bend on cash.
See, it is not the rural economy. let us understand that the entire composition of the GDP in this country over last 2 decades has changed. We were once upon a time a GDP dominated by agriculture and manufacturing sector, that is industry. Today, 60% of the GDP comes from service sector. And out of that service sector, maybe I would say a very liberal estimate is that 50% is accounted for by the software and other kind of corporate companies. But still, bulk of it comes from smaller transactions, service providers, electrician, wireman, rickshawala, mandapwalas, caterers, which are still not accounted for. You
So this
understand?
is the unorganized service sector, you mean to say?
Very right. You when you talk about Indian economy, it will be absolutely a wrong thing to say that this is an economy which can be 100% made accountable or transacted through accountable platforms like the electronic platform. Agriculture is another 18% of your GDP, which bulk of it gets transacted in cash. Let's face the fact. So what you have? You have 30 as half of the GDP of the service sector, and almost entire agriculture sector is 18%. So about 48%. And then roughly 5 to 7% micro and small industries, and even larger industries is the payments like transports and petty cash, accounts for cash transactions. So even today, I believe that 50% plus GDP in this country is getting transformed or transferred, changing hands in cash.
So very clearly, I mean, again, the same thing. Do you see a broad daylight after this post-demonetization exercise?
See, the country is going to move on. If you, let's go to the 1820 era, where India and China put together accounted for more than half the GDP of the world. Then the Europe and Latin America and America rose, and by 1980, India and China accounted for less than 10% of the GDP of the world. Now again, there is an upswing that today India and China put together account for 33% of the GDP of the world. So these two economies are going to rise. Indian economy will rise if it is permitted to rise, I would say so.
So these kind of resistance, or basically kind of adjustments, if don't happen in economy, you mean to say this may rise to a certain extent?
I won't say resistance. Kinks are bound to be there when you are making any policy change or changeover. There are going to be kinks which will affect the economy. But by and large, India has the great advantage that we have the largest free market in the world. If you talk about, very few people know, we are always mesmerized by the glamour of the larger industrial complexes and all that. Very few people know that the consumption of what they produce, bulk of it lies in rural markets. 50% of the cement produced in this country is consumed by the rural market. 55% of the two-wheelers, motorcycles produced in this country are consumed by the rural market. 60% of the clothes produced by this country is consumed by the rural market. I can go on counting the percentages which are in a very close proximity, plus or minus 5% of the median, that is 50%. So I think, if you don't have rural market which is prospering, and I think the real danger to the Indian economy is coming from the possible problems or slowdown that the agriculture sector might face. which is the main stay of the rural economy. 50% plus jobs and the 275 million tons of food grains, second largest production of fruits and vegetables in the world, and bulk production, number one production of milk in the world, as well as living behind Brazil now, the sugar production in the world,
Okay.
comes from these people. And because of the fragmentation of agriculture land, because of the problem the agriculture is facing. If you are not able to keep up the same rate of growth, where Dr. Swaminathan flatly said, where he was asked that, are you expecting the second green revolution? And his reply was alarming. He said, no, it's not the green revolution, it's the greed revolution. Now, this is loaded with tons and tons of wisdoms and possibilities that we can interpret out of it.
Okay. So largely you say the economy would grow irrespective of these kind of issues. But my question comes that you had said that everything that is cash is not a black money. As India's two-third economy was or is cash economy, does this yet stand true with the 99% cash? I mean, I don't want to consider the point figures.
I am
but
not
the
surprised.
99% cash coming back to the banks.
I am not surprised by that. You know, this is so far so your increasing share of service sector and the expected growth and share of agriculture close to about 20% continues to be there. The transactions going to be cash transactions. You shall have, you know, you had 12 point something percent of GDP cash in circulation, which is one of the highest in the world. But then today at 10.2% roughly, you know, still it is 1/10 of the GDP which is in cash. So to say or that this will be transacted to electronic platform or digital transactions, and you will have cashless economy. It's you are in a fool's paradise. You can talk about less cash economy, where lesser transactions are in cash, more accountability, better tax buoyancy. All these things happen. But then again, let us not forget that the main revenue to the central exchequer is not income tax. It is the service tax, GST. And there, any purchase, even a small hutman dweller buys a small item, it is loaded with GST. So automatically the tax collection comes through. So I think that expectation of tax buoyancy only through raising the income tax collection or this kind of thing is again something with which I do not agree. The consumption increasing will increase the GST collection, will increase the items which are increasing the turnover, will increase the employment, which is the need of the hour, and will increase the overall buoyancy in the economy.
Almost 99% currency has been demonetized. Currency has came back into the banks.
Yes.
I don't work on that point 1, 2, or 3.
No, it's negligible. You know, it might be still stacked with some people who might not have got various reasons for that. So let's say near 100% has come back,
which clearly, implies that hardly any black money has been taken away from the system. What is your take on the same? When you know there is yet some unaccounted money lying with several cooperative banks, with several, institutes, with NRIs, with countries like Nepal and other places where the currency was used. So if you take this into consideration, do you see this would cross the 100% figure?
It might. And this might be because also of some fake currency that might have crept in.
Okay.
So I won't be surprised if the tally goes beyond 100%. But once again, let me tell you that cash is the last form in which you store the black money.
Repeatedly you have been saying
bulk
this.
Bulk of it is stored in real estate. Bulk of it is stored in jewelry. Bulk of it is stored in precious metals. It is the last form in which the black money is stored.
Okay, and let me just remind the audience over here that you're watching the Facebook Live with Dr. JayNarayan Vyas. And we are talking to him about the demonetization and the entire process, whether it has been successful or not, and largely on the 8 observations which have been made into the Parliament Panel's report and the Public Accounts Committee's report, which we'll be talking to him and trying to understand whether this has been a successful exercise or not. Till now, Dr. Vyas has been very adamant about what he has said in the first interview, that cash is the last form for a black money parking or a black economy, and he stands again firm on the same with the kind of figures and the data which he has come out with his studies, and he says that clearly the cash in circulation has increased. We are back to Dr. Vyas, and what we are asking him is that the entire operation, if you see, has facilitated a kind of unaccounted money into the banking system, thereby leaving the onus of recovering the tax and penalty upon the agencies. Is India today ready? Because at that time also I remember you said this is a mammoth task for the government. Is India today ready to undertake such a huge exercise of such a huge caliber after a kind of digital mapping with the kind of an exercise which you did in the name of demonetization?
See, I won't say that it is impossible. I would say it is fairly difficult. The huge, see, not to have information is a constraint, but to have the information
And
in
that's
excess
what
of
you
what you know need and not being able to deal with it is a disaster.
is a disaster.
So, where it will lead to only remains to be seen. How the agencies will be able to analyze it. How they will now, for example, they have made it simple that if there is less than 20 lakhs dispute, don't go into appeals, kind of thing. So that will eliminate some low and bottom of the pyramid kind of cases which are large in number and permit them to concentrate on few as far as the tax focus or recovery is concerned. But this is not going to help as much as one would expect, because simply in India today the government machinery has two problems. One is that it is highly understaffed. You don't have the volume of work has increased, but let us face the fact that comparatively the agencies are not staffed adequately to deal with it. The option could be, or the way out could be, that you simplify the system in such a manner that 20% of the recovery, which account for 80% of the cases, is eliminated, and agencies are permitted to focus on 20% of the cases where you can get 80% of the recovery. Some sort of a thing has to be done. How government would deal it and how governments of the day would look at it is another question. But someday, somewhere, you have to find a solution to this piling up of the cases and the kind of increase in workload which the agencies will be called upon to deal with.
You trigger up a very important concern when you say, the kind of thing with the government today is that the kind of machinery which is not available is not inadequate to address these areas. With the kind of data and figures, what I have read from your studies and papers is that the blackout economy is now estimated to constitute an alarming 50% of the country's GDP in several forms, putting cash again at the last kind of a form or whatever you call it. There are no reliable estimates. In this scenario, if we see the apprehension, about the availability of adequate resources, including the manpower and other paraphernalia, with the income tax department to handle such a gigantic task, is one area of concern. How do you see this will be addressed? Was this not considered, while undertaking this task of demonetization or addressing this huge exercise of demonetization? Because I recall you have been somebody who has been a bureaucrat, you have been somebody who has been a part of governance, and you said that these such decisions cannot be taken without a consideration. When we were talking about the number of currency notes printed or the kind of period required to print the number of currency note, which was almost 7 months. So how do you see this, with the alarming rise, no reliable estimates available, and the kind of manpower gap to address these areas basically?
See, if you read some of the finest essays on how the bureaucracy functions, the bureaucracy gets signals from their political masters, and increasingly, the bureaucracy of the day is becoming an activist kind of a bureaucracy rather than the conservative bureaucracy which it was earlier. Those who are sort of becoming part of that activism find express avenues to rise. Those who are kind of a theoretical copybook kind of bureaucrats, they are treated as very conservative and useless and cool their heels. So this activism in the bureaucracy, according to me, is one of the most dangerous thing that is going to happen to the Indian bureaucracy. And because of that, the kind of bending down, T.S.R. Subramaniam, who was our cabinet secretary and who passed away very recently, God rest his soul in peace. But he, in his book on the Netadom and Babudom, writes a very, 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 very important dialogue, mentions a very important dialogue, where one of his tehsildars is retiring. And he said, I was called upon to preside over the function to felicitate him. And since I did not have to do anything, I started talking to Saxena, as the name of the tehsildar. And I asked him that, Saxena, now that you are not in the service, can you tell me frankly, what is the difference between the Raj that you served and the present day democratic governments? And then Subramaniam comes up with some quotation, which is a queer looking observation. He says Saxena came up with a queer looking observation. He said, sir, during those days, a tehsildar thought, behaved, and was treated like a collector. In the present day government, a collector thinks, behaves, and is treated like a tehsildar. Now, he says this happened in 1966. I do not know what would have been his words if Saxena would have continued to see the present day government. Increasingly, bureaucracy bending down their knees or buckling to their political masters, has lost the capability. Perhaps we have some of the finest bureaucrats in the world, but those who are now expressway travelers, they do not want to be the truth tellers. They do not want to be the people who would stand up and say, sorry, sir, sorry, Mr. Minister, this cannot happen. They have become yes minister kind of bureaucracies.
So you mean to say they are not following the rule book, but they want to be politically correct?
I doubt. I have been seeing the bureaucracy over the last 20 years. There is a considerable erosion in the quality and the kind of compliance that they have been making.
But there are kind of concerns which you have raised, with no reliable estimates, of course, that 50% of the country's GDP.
32 to 35 lakh crores every year. Yes.
Exactly. So this is the amount.
It's a huge amount.
It's a huge amount. It's double the amount which you actually demonetized, if you see otherwise.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So in this scenario, how do you see the bureaucracy will really address this? You talked about the bureaucracy.
See,
the bureaucracy is not following the rule book. It is following a footsteps to be politically correct. So in this scenario, how will the bureaucracy really address this scenario?
See, let us understand there are two stakeholders. One is government. Government has to earn the revenue. The other is the public at large, the creators of the wealth. Now, why don't you have some dialogue with them and create some out-of-the-box kind of a thinking where this kind of investment, which you say, for example, I'll just give you off the cup observation. You are having huge shortage of residential houses. Now, if somebody uses whatever monies, whatever source he has, construction of the real estate or construction of the houses, it will promote the construction sector. It will also invest money which the government is falling short of investment. And ultimately, that is not going to go down as the black money now.
Yeah, there are several check marks and several benchmarks.
You will have to, this tax and the beating with the stick all the time is not the way out.
Okay.
The tax collection will be more if you have some out of the box kind of a thinking. And I think that is precisely where we need to focus on, and the Indian Finance Ministry and the economic advisors have to think about.
Friends, till now we have been discussing with Dr. JayNarayan Vyas on our Facebook Live about the outcome of the demonetization exercise, and the conclusion till now what we have talked about him is that the cash component has increased and it is almost 32 to 35 lakh crore, which is double the amount as compared to what was demonetized. Number one. Number two, with a 99% cash coming in, we don't know as to what extent this exercise was successful or not, and the kind of roadblock which we have in terms of bureaucracy, which wants to be politically right and not right according to the rule book. So how will this be addressed? Because there are no reliable estimates, but Dr. Vyas clearly says that the 50% of the country's GDP, we have an estimated alarming constitute of black money or the parallel economy running it, which was, what I understand, was 24% when we did this interview before 2 years in India. This has gone to 50%. almost double. So my question now comes again over here, Dr. Vyas, is that how do you see basically, this demonetization or the tax or the digital foot, your take basically with, black component increasing in the economy
See,
and GDP cracking by
if
1%?
you look at the objective is not bad to remove or eliminate to the best possible extent the black money from this country. I think focus was wrong. The cash is not the only component; it is the least component amongst the possible avenues in which the black money is stored. As far as the digital platform is concerned, I think there is an increase. One can say that it has gone past 1 billion users. Nice. It's a very happy thing. It facilitates using of the digital platforms, less cash to that extent, more sort of accountable things happening. But if you look at the total number, that the possibility that you have, I think it's a long way you have to travel. This has happened, as I perhaps think, that during the time when there was a cash crunch, when the ATMs were running dry, when the banks were having shortage of cash, people have gone to the digital. So you should not count only numbers.
But that was on an ideal 15 percentage kind of a rise. It was
No,
just a 6 percentage
I
rise.
would say numbers doesn't matter to me. I would rather say what percentage of GDP.
No, but was that 6 percentage just to facilitate the urban crowd, which was not ready to stand in
not
the
to
lines,
facilitate.
which was not having a cash and had to make some payments for the restaurant bill or something?
I don't think it was anybody's design.
Okay.
Because they were competent, they have taken the
Yeah, but I mean that
path of least
the
resistance.
rise was just 6 percentage.
Yes, so I would rather like to know that before demonetization, what percentage of GDP was getting transacted
In digital.
through digital platform, and what percentage of GDP is now getting transacted through digital platforms. I think that is a more
That would be a
realistic
benchmark and a realistic
these
comparison.
numbers. It is more likely to mislead you rather than lead you to any conclusion.
But having said that, the way you narrated it rightly, that the GDP had taken a toll, that's a fact. There has been some green shoots, of course, in last one quarter, what the government is telling. But the wage and trade losses, if you see, the large unemployment in the informal sector has disrupted mainly rural economy, but it's all due to the fallout and a severe shortage of cash in the system. You had clearly pointed this thing in the past interview, saying that cash component in the rural economy, the agriculture sector is something which is vital. It was a kind of a oxygen or a blood to keep that economy reeling the way it was. Now you give a more flashlight even on the service sector and the kind of small payments made even to probably a cobbler or a man who is ironing your shirt, or you take a auto or whatever kind of services you consume. So how do you see this? On one hand, a dent in 1% economy, rise in the rise in the parallel economy almost doubled, and the kind of job losses.
So you have to understand one thing very clearly. Any change, whenever implemented, the first reaction is that it is resisted. No change you will find is implemented without any resistance. Second, the initial impact could be that this resistance might have some unpleasant fallout effects. The queues for exchange of notes, and I tell you that they were not black marketers. They were not people who had black money who were standing in queue to exchange notes. But then it does matter when people die. So it has some unpleasant fallout effects when you are implementing any change. So I would say that any change is resisted, any change once implemented might have some fallout effects which are not so pleasant. But coming to the consideration and coming to your statement regarding Indian economy, I would not entirely blame the demonetization.
Okay.
It must take its part of the blame where it is due. But if you look at the bank NPS, I have the figures. In March 2015,
True.
it was 3.23 lakh crore. In March 16, 6.1 lakh crore. And in March 18, 10.4 lakh crore. So what does it indicate? This indicates that and who are using bank finances? The bank finances are being used by those segments which are mainly contributory to the economy. When these segments are not doing well, maybe there are few black ships who might be willing defaulters, but by and large, such huge default cannot be only willing defaulters. So this is an indication that economy was already going downslide, and therefore to blame demonetization solely for the loss of GDP by 1% or whatever Dr. Manmohan Singh said 2%. At least it is heartening to now see that it has been around 1%. This might have happened because of various complex reasons, including some international factors.
So the sideline triggers, if we don't talk, I mean, NPA is one area which you try to address, and you said that NPA, somewhere the way it has been, the data and the numbers have been, somewhere demonetization did really not help to address the NPA. The kind of trigger which was there, which was of course not one of the objectives of the demonetization, but a kind of a perception which was there largely within the audience, was that this will help in reducing the NPAs. There was a huge cash pile up, the interest rates went down, but the borrowing or debt did not happen. Interestingly, today Vyas has done a fantastic story saying that just n number of amount of crore rupees has been dispersed to 615 accounts, and that's just agriculture loan. And these are corporates to whom this loan has been dispersed. So how do you see this, this hidden agenda? I mean, the narrative definitely was to curb the black economy, to curb the counterfeit notes in the system, to curb the terrorism. Nothing of that has happened. Even the Boom did a fantastic story wherein they compared the speech of the Prime Minister of India on every occasion, and they matched the two graphs wherein the speech had moved, wherein the three core components had reduced to the cashless or the digital India, and that was at a rise by the time of UP elections. So how do you see this NPA? When you raise this question, do you see NPA was, even if it was a hidden agenda, it was addressed?
So I don't think NPA could not have been the hidden agenda. NPA has direct correlation with the economy. If the economy is buoyant, if the economy is doing well, if the industry is earning profits, obviously NPAs will do better. They will get reduced. But let us also remember what Harold Ginin has said. Harold Ginin has said that larger is the system, larger are the layers of inefficiency. So what you quoted is one of the glaring examples of how some people, very worthful and very capable, have found a way to deal with these layers of inefficiency in our Indian economy and make the most out of it. So these 600 or 700 people who made corporate companies and took the best out of the agriculture policy, I think these are the people, not all of them, but quite a large number of them. They were experts and had the necessary wherewithal and the competence to feed the system. We have become a system which relies more on figures rather than any other assessment. So to feed the system what they accept as their feed and make the best out of it. So there is definitely those who did it with malified intention must be brought to books, and the government must deal with them in such a manner that there is a message that gets conveyed loud and clear that anybody who is trying to tinker with the system, trying to sort of play fraud or do something which is not ethical, will not be left out unpunished. It doesn't happen.
Understood. We'd just like to again take a call on this, that we're doing an FB Live with Dr. JayNarayan Vyas. He's demystifying the whole process of demonetization, what we call the conclusion, because the one which we did earlier before when the demonetization happened, that we call is a beginning, and this we call it a conclusion. So this is going to be a kind of a conclusive final word, and this brings me. Till now he has been talking about the things, and last what he said, that NPA was the hidden agenda of the government to address this. He clearly says this has nothing to do with the demonetization. It is clearly with the economy, and the people who have fiddled with the system, who have stashed up the cash from the economy or fled from this country, they should be brought to the books. They should be brought to the rule of law, and they should be clearly said and given the message that this kind of tinkering with the economy is not permissible. This puts me to one another question, Dr. Vyas, is that NPA was one area. If you see NPA and if you see the another area, that is the cost of printing the currency notes, the cost of calibrating the ATMs. I mean, 1% of the black money is yet accounted, but with the kind of things which we said, we see that more than 100% will come back. So how about this cost? And I am sure you had talked even about this. We had said that, with the kind of data which was given by Dr. P. Chidambaram at that time, and we had debated on this also. And we said that it would take 7 months to just print that 21,000 currency notes. So this cost of printing, cost of recalibrating ATMs, the kind of stress on the banking sector with the NPA burden. How do you see this? I mean, I want a very good explanation for the viewers.
My reaction is divided into two compartments. The first,
ગુજરાતીમાં જો કહું તો સોના કરતા ઘડામણ ક્યાંક
I won't buy that.
Okay.
I won't buy that. My reaction is divided in two compartments. Number one, yes, those figures of currency printing cost and other costs which you are saying are costs. Number one. Number two, where I do not agree, is that these costs need to be spread out. You make any investment in an industry or any venture, you are spreading it out over a reasonable period, by which the entire exercise gets neutralized. So to put that cost straight away and sort of percentile workings of it and then comparing it and then saying that this is what, I do not agree. It is a long-term measure, and therefore the expenses also which you incur for that must be spreaded out on a reasonable time line. It will be improper and unjust to say that this expenditure which is made is today only, and today only. These notes are not going to vanish tomorrow. So till such time you are going to use these notes, the cost of printing them must be accounted for and spreaded over that period.
Having said that, I mean, there could be more economic costs arising out of the demonetization which have not been possibility yet factored by the government. What is your take on that?
Well, there are a number of things which you can narrate out. But to say, once again, I'm telling you that to say pinpointedly that this is because of demonetization will not be possible. Let the analysts come out with any theories. These theories will always have the kind of other side, and you will always be able to punch holes in their armory, because demonetization is one factor. Today, what is happening world over as far as the economy is concerned, the rising cost, the weakening rupee, the economies of other countries not doing so well, economies of China itself going through a rough weather.
Turmoil.
This is something which you cannot look at it in isolation. If you are in a globalized era, anything that happens anywhere on this globe is going to affect you. Its scale might be lesser or more.
But I remember this. This again brings to mind that question which I had talked at that time, that China depreciates its currency and there is impact, there is a spillover across the world. India just puts out a note which is in practice, in use, and there is impact within the nation. We as an economy, as India as an economy, are not insulated to the global economic and financial problems and global and economical financial crisis. In that scenario, how do you see this decision of demonetization was a justified one?
See, I would say on the other way around, we are an inward-looking economy. If you look at our part of the world trade, it is less than 2% always. On the other side, you have huge internal markets which keep the Indian economy going. If you look at pharmaceutical industry, we are third largest in the world in terms of volume, but 13th in terms of value. So we have the market. This market is so stratified that you have a room for 500 rupees shirt also, and you have a room for 15,000 rupees shirt also. Sure. So Indian market, which is single largest free market in the world, offers so much an opportunity to Indian economy and Indian manufacturers. In fact, in a way, it is insulated that way, that you don't have much to worry about depending upon the foreign currency or the happenings elsewhere. We will have our inner consumption. What all you get influence with is 2% of your world trade, by and large.
So there's a joke making rounds on the social media in a crude manner that the government might think now to demonetize the dollar because that really buys your statement that we are an inward-looking economy and we may not be really affected by these things. On a lighter note, of course.
Right.
But I mean, we just go ahead. We continue with this again. That there are just last three questions we'll be talking, and committee which is not entirely convinced, the Public Accounts Committee, which is not entirely convinced with the government's decision to curb fake currency notes by cancelling the tender character of older 500 and 1,000 rupees. Why such disparity between regulations? The government and the committee does not mean that the move was a thoughtful one, or is it that the kind of the kind of brainstorming which is happening now when the people are realizing that this was not a thoughtful move? Like, you have a clear cut take that you just can't blame demonetization. There could be other external factors. On that note, you even say that India is an inward-looking economy, so you need to have the kind of recalibrations within. But then, do you think this was not a thoughtful move?
See, we follow Westminster model, and there are some advantages. There are some now distinct disadvantages also emerging out of this model.
Okay.
These committees of the Parliament or the Assembly are basically formed so that they have a lot of time to look at some issue of importance. They have across the party presence. Members are not guided normally by the political views which they are constrained to observe in the Parliament or the Assembly. And they can also have the benefit of experts whom they can call, and also the government officers or the ministers whom they can call as witnesses. This is the best part. That look at the objective and formation of the committee. It is the best thing. Of late, the public account committees, I am not blaming any political party. Increasingly, we are becoming a democracy which is so tightly compartmentalized and so fractured that whatever you are doing has, to some extent, some sacrifice of the reality. So if you have somebody who is heading as the leader of the opposition or leading member from the opposition, a committee, obviously his party will not permit him, even whatever. And I'm not passing any observations on the Public Accounts Committee. Let me be very clear. This is only an academic analysis of what I have seen. So somewhere, some political hue and color comes into working of these committees also, number one. Number two, any issue you take and put it under microscope, no issue is going to have 100% favorable things. There is also other side of the coin. And if you focus as Public Accounts Committee or opposition on the other side of coin, I think there is again, the ruling party focuses only on the favorable sides. The opposition focuses only on the other side. The victim is the objectivity. The objectivity is sacrificed,
and the people who stood in the line.
The loser is the nation.
And the people who stood in the line, the honest people who stood in the line.
The stakeholders.
And the stakeholders, yeah, very true. So, do you mean to say that even these Public Account Committee are like, they're not following the rule book, they're trying to be politically correct?
I won't say that. I've got no business to pass any value judgment on them. But this is what, to my limited understanding, and having been part of such committees earlier, having seen some of the reports of such committees being stalled, being presented, I think this is what
this stands
seems to be happening.
Finance Minister Arun Jaitley has been very vocal in his blogs advocating that the demonetization has increased the number of taxpayers, has increased the tax collection. I just want you to explain to our viewers and readers what kind of a correlation does a demonetization exercise and a tax collection have?
I tell you, there are two things. Number one is, first of all, you'll have to discount the increase in tax collection by the increase in GDP.
Okay.
Obviously, when there is an increase in GDP, proportionately, so you have to talk about incremental increase. And when you talk about incremental increase, maybe only one factor responsible for that may not be the reason. Even if demonetization was very, very benevolent, it would have been all everything positive, and the economy was not doing well, or there is a warlike situation on the borders, the tax buoyancy would have disappeared.
So there is
And
no.
as you know,
so you mean to say there is no correlation between the tax
absolute correlation.
number of tax payers increasing and the tax collection going up and the demonetization.
There is some correlation, but there is no absolute correlation.
But even this is, don't you see this is plugged with a little kind of exercise which has been happening, the corporate insolvency resolution processes, or the kind of coca companies going out of the economy, the real kind of contribution coming in. The country more moving towards, because when I study the indices of the stock market, what I see is there are a few companies which really have a kind of bandwidth today to kind of address, to kind of deliver, or whatever is perceived in that context.
See, I have been a student of the stock market for almost last 4 decades.
Okay.
And one thing I have always quoted, that the stock market hardly moves on reality.
Okay.
Stock market moves either on expectation of something favorable or expectation of something
Not
adverse. So though it is barometer of the economy, stock market moves more on the hope or despair.
But then this correlation between the demonetization, number of tax collection increasing really does not stand the way it is.
Stock market cares 2 hoots for this. If somebody who are major players feel that this is the move which is likely to be very favorable to these industries, automatically, even before the day the thing is announced, there will be the shooting up.
Sure. So, I mean, the correlation between the demonetization and
absolute
the number of tax collection or the tax payers increasing,
I will not say,
or it lacks an explanation at this stage. That's what we can.
I would say it lacks the explanation. Apart from that, I will not say for one as any one reason except the fear of war, natural calamity, or some major events, and their fear, like Fed increasing or decreasing their interest rates. It doesn't impact the stock market.
I mean, there is no correlation also between this demonetization. So, I mean, yet it is not established as such. The way finance minister has been trying.
It will never be able to establish. Okay. We will never be able to establish.
I'll just take once again to the viewers, and we're talking to Dr. JayNarayan Vyas. He's demystifying the demonetization. We have read the last question, and the conclusion of the kind of discussion which has happened till now is that demonetization alone cannot be blamed for the crack in the economy if it is there. Demonetization has no correlation with the number of taxpayers increasing or the tax collection increasing. If this is a kind of explanation, this needs a more broad light on this, and explanation which needs to be explained in a little broader light by the finance minister. That's what the take. Dr. JayNarayan Vyas says. He has clearly said that the cash component has increased. The cash in circulation has increased. It has gone almost double to 32 lakh to 35 lakhs. The component of the black economy or the parallel economy, practice today in the Indian economy has increased from, which was 24% in November 2016-17, which has gone to almost 50%. Of course, there are no reliable sources, and he clearly says that the bureaucracy or the government, how it would address it, it is a big question as of date. Now, with this discussion, we reach to the last question, and then we'll make one very important announcement. So the last question, Dr. Vyas, is that discontinuing all other external forces, including the cyclical commodity prices, mainly the oil, of course, because we are an oil importing economy. To import oil, again, we buy dollars. So again, we are an importing economy in terms of currency also. And whatever earnings or savings we make, again, we buy and save it into a component or a commodity, which is again imported, that is good.
Additionally, to stabilize the rupee, we sell dollars.
So in that scenario, the currency momentum triggered out of several global economic crises. The last one, of course, the lira, where rupee has been depreciating. How do you see the common man surviving the double impact of demonetization and GST? Because today's headlines in the Gujarat, specifically if you talk of the Gujarati media, is that there has been raids of the tax authorities sensing 1,000 crore scam of bogus billing and Benami transactions. So these players are not out of the game. Surat, the data which says 88,000 crore rupees gone into bitcoins. So how do you see now a common man surviving amidst this all
See,
situation?
this is, I would always say, this is basically a gambling instinct that drives the human being.
Okay.
Those, as I told earlier, those who are wrongdoers and habituated wrongdoers must be dealt with absolute strictly. This is not happening. Those who have larger means at their disposal have also larger capability to hire better brains and fight the cases right up to Supreme Court. They have more political influence to influence the powers those be, and maybe uh, either wriggle out of this problem or migrate abroad. In all these things, what is worrying me is the migration of the value worth people. It is said that last year, close to about 10,000 people.
27,000 millennials, what they call,
Yes.
have migrated out of this country. That was the data, I mean, which was published.
So I was talking only about USA.
True.
So if they are going out of this country, this is a signal which has to be taken very, very seriously. When a person who has worth and who is migrating, not only with his worth but his expertise also to other countries, once upon a time we cried hoax of brain drain, and that brain drain is America's gain today. What you see, Silicon Valley to everywhere, NASA, base trained IIT boys and base trained graduates elsewhere in this country, they are working for them. Now, this is additionally wealth drain also.
Exactly.
Now,
This is not a brain,
this
this is a wealth
is
drain.
happening. This is very, very serious, and this alarm bell must be interpreted very seriously by the Niti Aayog, which is in charge of reading the economic environment and advising the government how to deal with it. Mr. Rajiv Kumar and his team, they must take a note of this. They must also look at the actual happenings and why a common man is not happy with the things that are around him.
Yep.
I think there is a need for a clinical look at the Indian economy very objectively, and then honestly planning the steps to improve it and implement it. Unless this happens, the inequality gap. There is an inequality report between 1974 and 2014. That is 40 years. The top 40%, the bottom 50%, and middle 40%. Their income in this period of 40 years has increased barely close to 90%. Whereas the top 10%, their income has increased by 700% plus. And top 1%, their income has increased by 2000% plus. And top 0.1%, their income has increased by 7,000 times plus. Now, this is a very serious thing.
So the richer is becoming the richer.
Income differential, the way it is going up, you have the what are you talking about? 90% of this country, if their income in last 40 years, 1974 to 2014, if it goes up only by 90%, and the top 10%, 700%, and then top 0.1%, where are we going?
So you mean to say the richer is becoming a richer and a poor
Has become a rich is becoming richer, and richer is becoming richest.
and the poor is getting
Poor and middle class, they are more or less just floating around.
True. Sure.
Both are, with all the beneficiary schemes and what all we talk about, the lower segment also, nothing much seems to have happened in last 40 years. What all we talk about, the salary earning class, then honest taxpayer class, which is the middle class, nothing seems to have happened with their upliftment anymore. It's a very dangerous situation. When
It's a
you
very
have
dangerous situation.
10% versus 90% in this country.
It's a very dangerous situation,
Very,
and this
very-
leaves with a clear-cut mandate for us to talk further that will the economy be the issue in the 2019 elections, or it will be fought again on the emotive issues. Yes, Dr. JayNarayan Vyas, thanks a lot for this conversation. We want to continue the string and series of conversations with you, and that's where we'll now trigger off on several other issues like how the economy will pan, how the things will pan from here. But for now, if we are talking of this conclusion of demonetization, what is the concluding remark you would like to make? Just a 2 or a 3 line statement according to whether it's successful or it's not successful.
See, demonetization, where you feel it is successful, you should documentize it. But more, where there are problems, where there are criticisms, where there are severe adverse impact which is being seen, I think there should be an honest effort to diagnose it clinically and rectify it and remedy it. To make something go wrong is not an offense if it happens unintentionally. But once you know something is going wrong and yet you continue to ignore it,
That
would
is
lead
wrong.
you to disaster. And this is what I would live with, that yes, there are some good effects of the demonetization. All that blame which is being rattled out in the name of demonetization are not exactly true, but there is the other side that one has to look into very seriously, and demonetization should not be an emotive issue for the government.
Sure.
An administration cannot look at something as their own child and therefore emotively attached to that. That can be a disaster. Like what Dhritarashtra was attached to Kauravas, which led to ultimately totally wiping out of the dynasty.
Sure.
You must look at it objectively, correct the mistakes, do the trajectory corrections, and move on. India has a great future.
Sure.
This century is going to belong to India and China. And if you want to really see that happening, you'll have to rise above petty prejudices, rise above this kind of hesitations where you are not willing to go for trajectory corrections and move on. I am sure the country has the resilience and the capability to take such things in their own stride and still continue to grow.
Okay. So, if I have to talk about your conclusive note, Dr. Vyas, then very clearly, doing wrong is not wrong. But knowing that what has gone wrong and not rectifying that, that is clearly wrong. This sparks a series of discussions which we are going to do with you, a string of discussions which we are going to do with you on, which are going to engage with you basically on agriculture, on economy, on the political scenario of the nation, on the kind of reservation steer quotas which are, reservation quota steers which are happening today across in the country. Thanks a lot for this time, Dr. JayNarayan Vyas,
My
and we
pleasure.
continue with such interactive sessions on every Saturdays, trying to engage the audience on the serious issues without criticizing it, without giving a kind of editorial opinions on it, and just see that we talk the facts and the figures. Thanks once again for talking to Dateline
Thank
Gujarat,
you.
Dr. Vyas.
Thank
It
you.
was
Thank you.
pleasure indeed talking to you.
Thank you.